Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, there we go.
Good morning, Mr. Daniel Pena.
How you doing?
Hi, good. My name's John Lodel, and I'm the chair of the English department here at West. And we have about 40 students who are gathered today live to hear you talk and to ask a few questions. But we're also streaming this live throughout the school today so that students will get a chance to watch your visit. So we thank you
Okay,
for spending some time with us today. I'm going to
absolutely.
step back and let you talk.
Sure. So, real quick, John, the format goes it's about an hour, right? And or 55 minutes, and then we're going to take questions for 15, is that right? The last 15 of that?
Right. We have about 55 minutes total, and if we could take questions about the last 15, that'd be great.
Okay, sounds
Thanks.
perfect. Well, how you guys doing? Can you see me? I am in a hotel room in San Jose, California. So, you guys are in Missouri, is that correct? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how I became an author, um, and I'll take questions at the end. So it's kind of an unlikely story that I ended up as an author because when I was your age, I wasn't a big reader. Um, actually, to be honest, I never read an entire book all the way through high school. I would just sort of figure out what I needed to know from the book, um, and then I would kind of just get out of there because I just wasn't a confident reader and I wasn't a good reader. So it's kind of strange that I became an author, and I want to kind of take you guys through how that happened. So first of all, there are a couple things from my childhood that I think enter into this. I was born right on the border of San Diego and Mexico. And so this is like probably one of the first reasons I think that I wasn't into education because I grew up in a town that was really, really working class. Everybody worked hard, had a good family, but nobody really had any aspirations in terms of education. So nobody wanted to go to college. Nobody I knew had gone to college except teachers. So that's one thing. Another thing is I grew up in a very poor area, and I always thought, well, people with money, those are the people who do good at school, and those are the people who are readers. That's another factor. I think maybe the biggest one though is something happened to me in second grade that was a real mental setback. Um, at the end of second grade, my teachers called my parents into the classroom and they said, "Hey, look, we can't let Matt go to third grade because he can't read." And so my parents came out and told me, and they said, "Hey, look, you're going to have to repeat second grade." In the middle of the speech, I do remember that he looked at us and he said, "I bet there's somebody out there who has a dream, something that you really want to do in life." And I was thinking, that's me, I want to be a college basketball player. And he goes, "For those of you who that applies to, go home tonight, write your dream on a note card, put it under your socks in your sock drawer. And then when you run low on socks, you'll see your dream and you'll remember what you're supposed to be trying to do." And I thought that was so corny at the time. I remember I elbowed my friend on the way out and I was like, "Did you hear what that guy just said? He said to write it on a note card? That's so lame. I would never do that." And my friend was like, "Yeah, man, that's hokey. I would never do that." I went home that night and I wrote it on a note card and put it under my socks in my sock drawer. Do you guys know why? Because just in case he knew something I didn't, I wanted to cover all my bases. Never told anybody I did that. Um, anyways, I ended up I was fortunate enough to get a college basketball scholarship, and it was like my dream come true. I was gonna play basketball in college, and I was gonna be the first one in my family to go there. And I remember there was a strange moment where my dad pulled me aside after I signed my letter of intent, and he said, "Hey Matt, I want to talk to you." And I had the kind of dad where we never really talked. Does it raise your hand if you have a dad that's kind of quiet, doesn't really talk to you that much? Anybody in there? Okay, so some of you guys get what I'm saying, right? I'll give you an example of my dad. This is who he was. He worked in construction, and he would come home every day and he'd do the same exact ritual. He would kick his dirty boots up on the table. He'd work a toothpick in his teeth. He'd drink a Mexican beer because he was very loyal to Mexican products. And he would watch his favorite show in the world. Do you guys know that show, Cops? My dad loves Cops. And anytime somebody got arrested, he would just start laughing really loud. I don't know why he thought that was so funny, but that's an example of who he was. But he never talked to us. So on this day, he pulled me aside and he told me this. He goes, "Hey, Matt, me and your mom, we were talking last night. We never thought you were going to go to college. We're like totally shocked." And I was like, "Thank you for the support, Dad. That's nice of you." And then he goes, "But we wanted you to know, we think you're a success." And then he took off. And as he walked away, I was thinking, why does my dad think I'm a success just for getting into college? I hadn't even taken a class yet. I still didn't know if I was smart enough to graduate. So I was like, why would he think I'm a success when my other friends, their parents didn't tell them they were a success just for getting into college? Because I went to a high school where there were a few more parents that had been to college. And I realized that this was the difference. My family, they had set the bar low. Like, if we did one little thing, we had impressed them. And my other friends that were going to college, their parents had been to college and they expected their kids to go to college. But not only that, they expected their kids to go to college and study something that would make good money or something that would be impressive to the world, like becoming a professional, like a doctor or a professor or a businessman that made a lot of money. So I realized that growing up without a whole lot of money, it actually worked to my benefit because I felt like I'd already impressed my parents. And when I got to college, it allowed me the freedom to choose a major and to pursue a job that I liked, not something that would impress other people. So based on what I've said so far, you may be able to imagine that when I got to college, my goal was still to be a professional basketball player. So that was kind of like what I really wanted to do. I didn't make the NBA, unfortunately. You guys may have already been aware of this. You haven't seen me in the playoffs this season. But there's one guy I blame for this. Do you guys know who Steve Nash is? You guys know him? Well, Steve Nash ruined my dream because we played against each other early in my career. I was a point guard. He was a point guard. I went to a school in Northern California. So did he, both smaller Division Ones. So when we went head to head, I thought if I outplayed him, maybe they would start talking about me in articles because he was getting all this attention. So we went back and forth, and this is the sad truth. That game, which we won by a couple points, he had 34 points, 14 assists, and I had 3 points and 1 assist. He destroyed me. And the weird thing is, I was like, why should he be so much better than me? We're the same height. We were the same build. But he just outplayed me by a lot. He was doing all the stuff that I did. He was just doing it better. So I ended up playing the rest of my years at University of Pacific. But the thing is, I didn't think that I was going to be an NBA player. I didn't even think maybe I was going to play overseas. I just thought, well, I'm lucky enough to get a scholarship and now it's going to pay for my school. So I had a mental transition where I started thinking, well, if I'm not going to play basketball in the pros, what else could I do? And so the first one I thought about was music because I loved playing guitar, but I was way too shy because I couldn't play in front of anybody. The other thing that I really liked to do, though, was all through high school, I wrote little poems in the back of class when I should have been paying attention. The thing is, I wrote these poems for a very specific intended audience. I wonder if you guys can guess who the audience was for these poems. And actually, I'm going to ask a certain person that's sitting in there. Is that cool? Because I can see you guys. You probably don't know I can see you. So it's a guy who's touching his chin right now. What's your name? You know who I'm talking about? White shirt. You got a little thing here. Oh, wait. There you go. There you go. So let me ask you this, all right? You ready?
Yeah.
Who do you think I was writing these poems to?
Steve Nash.
It was definitely not Steve Nash. I'm gonna get some more guesses out of you.
Oh,
So remember the woman who told me who I might be able to meet in college?
yeah.
Who did she say I might be able to meet because she knew how I was?
Some girls?
You're exactly right. What's your name?
Roosevelt?
Roosevelt?
Yeah.
The reason I called you out is because I have a feeling, Roosevelt,
No.
that you have many women in your life. Is this true?
I guess.
You know what? That's a good way to answer. That's very smart. No, so it was girls, and thank you for answering that.
So I can go sit down now?
You can go sit down, man. So, Roosevelt got it. All my poems were really about girls, and they were kind of silly, and to be honest with you, they weren't that good. But I took a lot of time writing them. And this may sound kind of strange to you, but there was one girl in particular I wrote the most poems about. She was beautiful. She was the best looking girl in the school. Her name was Julie Gonzalez. And I had her in my Spanish class. Okay. And we had open seating. So you could sit anywhere, right? But I found a way to always sit one seat behind her because I was savvy. I would wait till she walked in the door and then I would just follow her and go sit behind her. Do you know why I did this? Because she inspired me to write the best poetry because I would stare at her scalp. She had a beautiful scalp, just a wonderful back of her head. You guys may not think that this is a big deal with the opposite sex, but girls, check out the scalp of a guy. Guys, you got to check out the scalp of a girl. Make sure that is in order before you commit. So that's a little love advice. But anyways, this one day I wrote the best poem I thought I had ever written, and it was for Julie, and it was about Julie, and I folded it up, and right before lunch, I gave it to her, and I said this to her. It was a great line, okay? I walked up to her and I gave her the poem, and I was like, you should read this. So it was very romantic, and she looked at me and she's like, okay, whatever. So she took the poem, and as she walked away, I knew that every day Julie would go to McDonald's for lunch across the street with the same three girls. I knew she'd always go there and she'd order a Happy Meal and she'd fill her cup with orange soda and she'd sit at a table near the window. Does that sound like I'm a stalker? You know what, though? You guys call it stalking. I call it research. And so this day that Julie took the note, she went with her friends, and I watched her cross the street. And what I did is I started building a story in my head about how it would go. And I thought, okay, Julie's going to go into McDonald's. She's going to get her Happy Meal. She's going to sit at the table. And while she unwraps the burger, she's also going to unfold the note or the poem. And as she eats the burger, she's going to read the poem. And she's going to get to the bottom. And she's going to be so moved that she's going to begin to cry. And then I thought her friends were going to be like, Julie, why are you weeping? And I thought Julie would be like, you guys, I just read this incredible piece of literature by this amazing man. His name is Matt De La Pena. I thought she'd hold it up like this. Then I thought her friends would be like, Julie, do you think we could read the poem? And they'd pass it around the entire table. They'd all read it. They'd all start crying. And then they'd start throwing food at each other, fighting over who was going to be with me. And in the meantime, I was standing in front of campus. I had a direct line of vision right to the front doors of McDonald's. And I was what I call posting up against the wall, just like this, waiting for what was going to happen. I thought I was going to see her come out of McDonald's. Our eyes were going to meet. And she was going to start sprinting across the street to get to me. And I thought finally when she got to the other side, she'd throw her arms out, wrap me in a bear hug. We'd fall to the ground and start making out on the lawn. So I was ready for all of this, okay? And here's the sad part of the story, though. Finally, when the bell rang, she came out of the doors. Our eyes met, just like I thought they would. But instead of running toward me across the street, she went the other direction. So she totally dogged me out, wanted to avoid me. That was my junior year. Not only did she not come running that day, she never spoke to me again the rest of high school. You guys know what defense mechanisms are? It's like something happens to you, right? And you try to make yourself feel better by spinning the story a certain way. So during that time, like that day when she didn't come running, I said, you know what? Julie just doesn't understand poetry. She doesn't get me. So I was like, you know what? I'll find another girl. I thought that she didn't understand poetry for many, many years until she found me on Facebook about a year ago. She wrote me a message and she said, hey, Matt, do you remember that poem you gave me after Spanish? And I wrote her back and I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. That must have been somebody else. And she wrote me back and she's like, you know it was you. I know it was you. I'm going to send it to you. And I wrote her back and I was like, look, I am an author now. I can't have these kind of things floating around. Please destroy the document. And she refused. So she sent it to me. And I live in New York now, and I was in my Brooklyn apartment reading this poem. And I got to the end and I was like, oh my God, this is the worst poem I've ever read in my life. It was so bad. In the middle of the poem, don't tweet this, all right? Because you know what, my friends don't know about this. In the middle of the poem, I compared her face to a cumulus cloud. You guys know what that is? Those big white puffy clouds? I don't totally know what that means to this day, but I might as well have said, Julie, you have a gigantic white misshapen face, and that's not sexy. And you know what else? She was a Mexican girl, so she didn't even have a white face. It didn't make any sense, but I thought it was cool at the time. Anyways, I said, I'm going to become a poet. After the Steve Nash game, I said, no, I'm not going to play basketball professionally probably. I'm probably not brave enough to be a musician. I said, I'm going to become a poet. Because even though in that poem it wasn't very good, I don't know if you guys know what alliteration is. You probably cover that in school, right? I had never heard of that phrase in high school, but my poem had all this alliteration. And to this day, that's one of my favorite things about writing is I love the rhythms you can make with language and the sounds. A lot of people don't know this, but you basically are writing a song when you write prose, and you use punctuation to tell the reader how to sing your song. When you write sentences that are just dull and monotonous, there's no music to it. You got to find a way to put the rhythms in with sounds of words and where you put your periods. Anyway, so that stuff was in the poem, even though it wasn't good. I didn't know what I was doing. So the next thing that happened, though, that kind of changed everything for me is I finally was introduced to a book that affected me. It wasn't until I was a sophomore in college. So those of you guys who are already readers, you guys are so ahead of the game because reading is such a huge, huge thing. Think about the things that you can do with reading. You can go to other countries without leaving your room. You can understand how different people feel about things that make us sad, like death, or things that are funny or embarrassing, or love. You can experience all those things without leaving your bed. But I had never been connected to a book yet, so I just wasn't a reader. This professor came up to me my sophomore year. She had a book in her hand, and I had her my freshman year, so I didn't have her this year. She handed me the book, and she goes, Matt, I was thinking of you last night when I reread this book. You have to read this. You'll love this book. So I took the book, and she goes, look, Matt, you're not in my class right now, so you don't have to write an essay or take a test. Just when you finish before you graduate and come talk to me about it. Please, will you do that? And I said, sure. Because in my head, I was thinking, that gives me 3 years. I could do that. So here's the thing. I had never had a teacher or a librarian come up to me with one specific book and connected me personally to it. I don't know if any of you guys have, but it's like a weird thing because you're like, I wonder what's in this book that the teacher is thinking about me. So I took the book on a road trip with my basketball team to New Mexico State, and I started reading the book. And I have to be really, really honest with you guys. I got to page 30 and I thought, why did this professor give me the book? It's not any good. The narrator can't even speak that good of English. Again, I just didn't connect with it. So I almost put it down, but the thing is, I really needed to find out why the professor had connected me to this one particular book. That's why I kept reading. Normally, I would just throw it down and just say, hey, it's not for me. You know, on a side note though, this is another thing that I hope you guys, if you remember anything from this talk, just trust me about this thing. Anytime you read a new book by a new author, somebody you've never read before, it's going to feel awkward and uncomfortable for about 25, maybe even 30, 35 pages. Because you know what? You have to actually learn the rhythms and the style of this new author before it starts to sink in and feel comfortable. Especially if you guys come off like reading 2 books or 3 books by the same author. Like if anybody's read The Hunger Games, if you read all the Hunger Games books, you kind of feel like, okay, this is what writing is. This is what it should feel like. And then if you read a different book by a different author, it's going to feel different. And so that difference is going to make you feel uncomfortable and awkward. So please give a book, every book you read, give it 30 to 35 pages before you decide if you're going to continue. By the way, I'm not the kind of guy who says you have to read every book you start, but some of the best books you ever will read are going to start off feeling uncomfortable. Has anybody experienced that where at first you didn't like it, but you ended up loving the book? So, okay, cool. So some of you have already been through this. Roosevelt, you've been through this, Roosevelt? Nice. So anyways, I'm sorry to keep calling you out Roosevelt. I just like your name. Anyways, so I kept reading the book just to find out why the professor had given it to me. And then something happened. I started to really care about the character. Reading is the ultimate form of empathy because these characters that you care about, they can't do anything for you, right? They only exist on the page. They're not going to help you at all. They're not going to come and give you a ride anywhere. But the truth is, you care about them. And so that's why it's really a true form of empathy. And I started to care about this character. And then I started really wanting her to be okay because she had a really tough life. And I'll tell you the name of the book in a second. I read half the book that night. The next day we had a game. We played the game. We won. I came back and I finished the book that night at 4 a.m. First of all, I'd never read a book in 2 days, and it was a very cool feeling that I just knocked down this book in 2 days. But then something really crazy happened. I turned the last page and I found that I was on the verge of tears. And I just sat there going, whoa, I can't believe I feel something so emotional from a book. And it was this weird feeling because I grew up in a really machismo family. Like, do you guys know what machismo means? Like, if you're a guy, you're not supposed to cry. You're supposed to be tough, right? I mean, I grew up in the kind of family where if I was your age and I was walking with my dad down the street and I got hit by a truck, you know, and let's just say I had a leg on this side of the street and like a ankle in a bush over here, you know what my dad would do? He would find wherever my head was, even if it was bloody, and he'd point to it and be like, all I'm saying, Matt, is you better not cry. So that's how I grew up. And the fact that I was about to cry from a book was the weirdest thing in the world. Before I tell you guys the name of the book, Roosevelt, I want you to know I did not cry that day. I toughed it out. Because you know what? You guys may not know, it's not an official cry unless a tear comes out of the eye. And what I did is I felt it coming on and I just looked up and it soaked back in, and it was all good. So I don't want Roosevelt to think I'm soft over here. Do you guys know this book? It's called The Color Purple. Have you ever read that? Seen the movie? Well, this book changed my life because I became a reader that day because I wanted to feel those same feelings, and I went looking for that feeling in other books. So some of the books I missed in high school, like Catcher in the Rye, Of Mice and Men, several books that had been assigned to me that I didn't fully commit to in high school, I went back and read. Some of them were amazing. Some of them weren't amazing, but a lot of them were. And I became a reader simply because of The Color Purple. And the weird thing is, it became my secret. Like, I never told my teammates that I read all the time. I never told my uncles or my dad, but I would read secretly alone in a room, and I'd look for a book to make me feel something, because that's the only way I would get it. Once I became a big reader, that's when my writing changed. My poems began to talk not only about girls, but also to talk about identity. I'm a biracial person. My dad is Mexican, my mom is white. I don't know if anybody in the room right here is biracial, but it's an interesting thing to grow up with two races, because sometimes you feel like you're not white, but you're not Mexican either. You feel like you're like somebody who doesn't fit into either group, and you have to kind of navigate that terrain and go back and forth. And sometimes you're actually two people. If you're with your dad's side, you act kind of one way, and with your mom's side, you kind of switch gears. Those of you who are biracial, you kind of get what I'm saying. I started to write about that. But then the biggest thing I started to write about was growing up without money, and those feelings, and how, you know what, the people that I grew up with, they had beautiful lives, but a lot of people didn't think they existed because they just didn't care about anybody who didn't have anything, who was living in this border town by Mexico. And it was almost like we didn't exist. So I started writing about stories about people who lived in poor neighborhoods, because I love working class people. It's my favorite thing in the world to talk about. So my poems changed because of I started to become a reader. I ended up going to graduate school. I studied creative writing, and I read as much as I could. I wrote as much as I could. When I got out of graduate school, I moved to Los Angeles, where I got my first job writing with writing. I wrote for MTV. I wrote for a TV show that was a reality TV show. And I don't know if you guys know this, but reality TV is not real. Do you know that? I know, Roosevelt, you love that show, Jersey Shore, but just so you know, it's not totally real. When I found out the shady things they do, the writers on reality TV show, and how some of it's staged, and how sometimes they try to make you fight or make you argue, that's when I was like, you know what, this isn't real. And if I'm going to write fiction, I'm just going to write fiction. And so it was during that job that I started my first book, which became Ball Don't Lie. And I'm just going to quickly take you through my books, and then I'll turn to you guys for questions. So my four novels, the first one's called Ball Don't Lie. It's the story of a kid named Sticky. He's a great basketball player, but he struggles everywhere else because he's a foster kid. He has no money. He's passed from home to home. His girlfriend, her name is On too. And the plot of the book is, the day of the book, she's turning 16, and he wants to get her a gift, but he has no money. So he's trying to figure out what to do. And I always like to tell people that I take so much from real life and put it into my stories. That plot is from something that happened to my cousin. She lost her boyfriend, who was trying to mug somebody to get money to get her a gift. And, he got shot and killed because he tried to mug the wrong guy. That happened when I was 7 years old, and I never forgot it. And it became the plot of my first book. Also, the girl's name, On too, I stole that in Venice Beach when I met this girl, and her name was On too, and I just took her name. I thought it was an interesting name. And then, obviously you could tell the basketball thing is sort of from my real life. But the obsessive compulsive thing, if you guys don't know what that means, it means you're kind of obsessive or compulsive about different things, like maybe you turn the lights off or you check the lights to make sure they're turned off like 5 times before you leave the house. Or maybe you line up your shoes a certain way in your room or in your closet. These kind of things are OCD. And I have some of those things too, but I love watching other people who have these strange things. So, anyways, that's Bottle Night. It's been made into a movie. It hasn't been released yet, but it's already been made. Hopefully, it comes out at the end of the summer, and it has some people you might know. It has Ludacris, Nick Cannon, Roseanne Arquette, Melissa Leo, and I'm in it for 2 seconds, and I feel like I'm the star. So, even though it's only 2 seconds, it's a very powerful, powerful Roosevelt. It's powerful, man. What I did in this scene, I was a referee. So, anyways, there is a movie version. The second book is called Mexican White Boy, and Mexican White Boy is very, very personal, and it's kind of talking about that thing I just said in terms of navigating two races as a biracial kid. And it takes place where I was born and where I kind of grew up, National City, right by the border. My third book is called We Were Here, and We Were Here, it's kind of my favorite of mine, mostly because it's inspired by a book that I love called Of Mice and Men. Do you guys read that in your school? Has anybody read that for class? No? Of Mice and Men is by this author named John Steinbeck. It's a beautiful short novel. The two main characters, one of them is kind of smaller and really clever, and the other one's really big, but not as clever, not as smart. And so those two characters have a great, amazing relationship. And I wanted to kind of be inspired by that. So I sort of used my own relationship that's kind of similar in terms of like the big guy and the small guy. So that's We Were Here. My newest book is called I Will Save You. And I Will Save You is kind of my sad book. It's about a kid who witnessed something when he was 7 years old with his parents. He saw it happen, and he can't get past it. He lost his parents here, and he's trying to deal with depression, and he's trying to get his life back on track. He's also what is known as an unreliable narrator. An unreliable narrator is somebody who's telling you the story, but you can't be sure if you can trust what they're saying because they may not have it right. So he's a big unreliable narrator, and there's a pretty big twist at the end of the book. And if you guys ever read that book, there are clues all over. I think one of my classes that I went into, they had read the book, and they had counted all the clues, and they came up with over 100 clues. So their clues are throughout the book, but most people don't really see them because they're kind of like hidden or they're subtle. So that's my fourth book. And then the book that I just finished, it hasn't been released yet. It's coming out about this time next year. It's called The Living. And The Living is about a kid who works on a cruise ship. While he's out on the cruise ship doing his job, the big earthquake that's been rumored forever hits California. And he doesn't know if he's lost his family, and he kind of has to go back and see what happened. So those are my books. That's my story. Let's turn to you guys. What are some questions you guys have?
Hi,
Hello.
I'm Fabian Vasquez, and I was wondering, was the book Mexican White Boy based upon your life, and had any of the events in the book happened to you?
Okay, you know what? Your name's Avian?
Fabian.
Fabian. Did you read the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay, Fabian, do you remember the scene where the uncle in the store backs up the truck and runs over the dude's legs?
Oh, yeah.
That really happened. I was really in the car when my uncle did that, and it was crazy, and I was like, what the heck? This is nuts. That really happened. A lot of the things in the book really happen. I would say the most made-up character is Uno. But I feel like I'm a version of Uno and Danny together. If you put those together, that's sort of how I was when I was young. Sophia is really based on my cousin, whose name is Narissa. My Uncle Ray is really my Uncle Tim. The thing is, there are a lot of things that are made up, but the core of the story is very, very personal. So, to answer your question, yes, a lot of it's real.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Baby, and I like your bag.
Thank you.
Don't let Roosevelt reach in there and grab your chapstick.
Okay. Hi, my name is Taylor.
Hi,
and,
Taylor.
I just have a question. Like, what first inspired you to start writing stories?
I think it's because they always say that, oh, some people are born to be writers. Have you ever heard that, Taylor? Like, some
Yeah.
people are born to be writers. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that some people are born with a different way of seeing the world, and those people sometimes can make good writers. So, what I always noticed are little things that a lot of people didn't see. So, Fabian read Mexican White Boy. An example of a little thing that I like to notice, and sometimes they end up in my books, are there's the moment where Sophia talks about seeing a little girl in a park that says, "Here I come," to her parents, and she's going down the slide. Like those small little parts of life, I think are beautiful and they're amazing and they're interesting, and most people don't notice them. And so I want to take those little things and put them in a book or a story because then people will have to pay attention to them. So I think that's why I started writing. Is I used to notice these little things. Like, have you ever walked past somebody at your school who you're not even friends with, and you can tell they're very sad, and nobody even realizes that they're alive and that they're hurting right now, and it kind of moves you? Like, that happens to me all the time, and I want to be able to put those people in books so that people can see them.
And is there anything that inspires you now to start writing, or is
I
that
think,
like answer your question?
Wait, say it again.
Or did you already kind of like answer the question in the?
No, I think what keeps me going is that I feel like the longer I have a career in writing, the more books I have. Kind of what happens is the more people that read your books. So I guess in a weird way, I'm having more of an opportunity to show people the things that I think are important. For me, people who grew up or are growing up without money, I think their lives are beautiful too, and I get to put them in books, and it makes me so happy that somebody from a really fancy neighborhood, if they ever read one of my books, they're going to see these characters like Sophia in Mexican White Boy, and they're going to get to know her, even if they won't get to know the actual person who's down the street from them. So, yeah, that kind of continues to inspire me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.
My name's Jose.
Is that a hockey sweatshirt?
Yeah, Blues.
What team is it? The Blues?
Yeah.
Are they in the playoffs?
No, they lost. They
They did?
were, yeah, but they lost.
Oh, they were in the playoff stuff?
Yeah, they
Who
were.
beat them?
LA, yeah.
LA?
Yep.
Do you still watch the playoffs? Are the Rangers in the playoffs still?
No, I don't think so.
The Rangers are out?
Yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be a bummer when I go back to New York because I have a lot of friends who are Ranger fans.
Yeah. Well, I just have a question. Where did you get the ideas for We Weren't There for the characters?
For We Were Here,
Yeah.
the main character, Miguel, he talks exactly the way I talked when I was a kid. Rondell is based. So you read We Were Here?
Yeah, I've read it.
Oh, very cool. So Rondell is based on one of my college teammates. Do you remember Jaden, the counselor?
Yeah.
He's based on me too, because I worked in a group home for a year, and I'm kind of making fun of myself because I used to go in there and think I was going to change everybody's life and they were going to be amazing people
Yeah.
after they worked with me, but that was kind of unrealistic. So he's sort of me too. Mong is completely made up. Do you remember the girl who picks them up and tries to take them to San Francisco? It's Mong's cousin.
Yeah, the one that Miguel fell in love with a little bit.
Yes, I married that girl. So she's based on the girl I ended up marrying. And so she, my wife, who I've been married to for about 8 months, she said, "Put me in a book. You got to put me in a book."
Yeah,
And so I
okay,
put her in a
so-
book, and I kind of put the silly things about her, like, how she talks nonstop.
Yeah.
So when she reads the character now, she's like, "That's not me." And I'm like, "Yes, it is. You talk way too much." So, but yeah, a lot of these people are from real people.
All right. Well, I like that twist that you put whenever you made them swim into the ocean.
You know what? Wait, what's your name?
Jose.
Jose. I'm going to tell you exactly where I was inspired by that. First of all, I love the ocean, and I think, oh, you're talking about when Mong went out there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So there's something crazy with the ocean and me. Like, I think the ocean is special. I think it's like the most amazing part of our earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, we all come from the earth, in my opinion. Like, we're all like from the dirt. Like, we've just evolved into these human beings with brains, and we make things, but really we're part of the earth. And I loved the idea of Mom walking out into the most beautiful part of the earth and just or rejoining the earth. So I'm glad you like that scene, because that scene makes me sad, but I
Yeah,
love
it
it at the
does.
same time.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Jose, before you sit down.
All right.
Why do you think Mong walked into the water? If you haven't read the book, I'm sorry, but why do you think he walked into it?
I don't know. I think it was just too much for him to bear, because he said that he really liked the ocean, and that he just had the many problems that he had with his father trying to kill him and all that.
Yeah, and also, do you remember there was something going on with him physically?
Yeah, his liver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, by the way, you're a good reader. You picked up on everything, but I think he knew that he wasn't going to make it much longer, and he wanted to be in control of when he went out and where.
Yeah.
And by the way, Jose, do you remember where on the beach that was and why it was significant? If you get this, I'll be impressed.
What was it? What am I don't know. I forgot.
Do you
'Cause
know?
I finished it last week, so I.
Oh, no worries. There's a house that was right behind them, and that's where his dad used to take him in the sun. It was like his only good memories of his dad. So it's like he wanted to go walk out into the water directly in front of that house. It was kind of his
Okay.
last good memory.
Yeah. So he just wanted to make sure he left in a good place.
Exactly.
Okay.
Good reading, Jose. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too.
Hi, my name is Rajane.
Hi, Rajane.
Hi, my question today is, what is your writing process like, and how long does it take you to write a book?
Okay, that's a good question. It changes with every book. So my first book took 2 years. My second book took 2.5 years. We Were Here took me 5 months. It was the fastest book I've ever written. And at that point, I was like, wow, I figured out how to write a book. I guess the rest of my books will take me that long. And then my last book, I Will Save You, took 2.5 years. So I didn't figure out anything. So it's all different. It just depends on how difficult the voice is and the plot is. We Were Here just flowed out for some reason. It was like a really quick process. And that's why it's kind of my favorite book, because I'll never forget that I actually wrote a book in, less than a year.
That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you guys are
I know these guys would love to stay all day and talk with you, and unfortunately, we have to let them get back to class. And I know you have a
Absolutely.
busy day, so thank you so much for talking with us
Thanks,
today.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.